Guru Nation, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share if you're listening. I equally appreciate it. It's just me riding solo. You don't always need a guest. Guests are great. I love guests because I learn from them too. But this one, we had a monitoring visit today. I just followed up with the findings with Luis. What the monitor thought they thought they found one critical deviation. It was not the case. It was a subject data entry error that will be fixed. But it got me thinking. All right, what is a good topic for this video? One that I haven't done, and I've kind of danced around this, but never went in depth, like fully in depth. And it's how to prepare for a monitoring visit if you are a site. And it's important because I know a lot of sites out there, all the coordinators we have here at YCT are about a year of experience. And except for the lead CRC, she's 2 going on 2.5. And then me, I've been doing this since 2005. So I'm going on 20 years almost. But it's still, even 20 years in, it's still like, especially in a new study, you're a little bit nervous as a site. You don't really know if you did everything right. Sponsor CRO trainings are not the best a lot of the times. I know if you sponsors and CROs are listening or watching, you don't want to hear that. But I think more emphasis needs to be placed on site training, like proper site training, especially when it comes to safety issues for patients. But that's a whole nother podcast. I actually did I did a series with Darshan Kulkarni on it, on the fraud pod, but just how to get ready for a regular monitoring visit. And there's a couple of things you want to do. There's definitely things that you want to be prepared for. And there's really 3 components to what they're going to look at. And then there's like the logistics of everything. So the first, let's just get rid of the logistics. Make sure you know that they're coming. Like if you see on your calendar, my monitor is coming next week, reach out and ask, hey, we're still on for this week, especially if you didn't receive a confirmation letter. Make sure that you receive the confirmation letter and that you are aware and that it's on the calendar. And then if you have a team like we do, make sure everyone's on the same page about who's going to be there to greet them. Oftentimes the monitors want to show up early because they want to leave early, or oftentimes they want to show up early because they want to get started. There's a lot of data they got to review. So actually happened today. The monitor showed up, and this is not our first monitor. He's been here many times. We knew he was coming, and I assumed that one of our CRCs would be at the site at 8, and all the other CRCs would be at the other clinic preparing for the future visits, for the visits later on in the day here at this site where I'm sitting. And then our lead CRC, Katie, is out of town, so I'm more like the manager now. And it turns out the coordinator that I thought was supposed to be there at 8 was actually not planning on being there at 8. He had a prior appointment for a dentist. And so I had to scramble, and I had to call one of the other CRCs. Luckily, she was at this site at 7 a.m., I said, hey, the monitor's actually there. The monitor texted me, hey, I'm here. It was around 8:03. Hey, I'm here. No one's here. And they rang the bell a few times because the receptionist has to ring the bell. And I told him, hey, go ahead and go. He knows he's been there before. Go and be seated like where you're supposed to go. And someone will be there right now. And he just waited in the waiting room. And within about 5 minutes, maybe 10, our other CRC ended up going there. But if that other CRC wasn't there early, like she always is, they would have waited a little bit longer, because then I would have had to call my other coordinator, and I already sent her on a dry ice expedition to go find dry ice for a future visit today. And anyways, it would have been a mess. Like, I would have had to come all the way down here, and I had a bunch of Zooms, and I live like 30 minutes from here. So just make sure you don't have to do a dress rehearsal, but the day before, and this was probably my fault, physically ask the coordinator that you assume is going to be there at 8, hey, remember the monitor is going to be there at 8? Okay, you're going to be there, and then everyone else can be here. We just assumed everyone knew. and it was a little bit miscommunication. No big deal, but you don't want to get you don't want to go through too many of those, especially when it's a newer monitor and they haven't monitored your site before. So there's a couple of things as far as like admin type of things. The next thing is like make sure that the monitor knows how to communicate with you, either your cell phone number or your email. If that monitor didn't know how to text me, I think the clinic, like the receptionist, would have had to call me at some point. And I don't always answer my calls because I'm on Zooms. And then they wouldn't have called the other coordinators because they're not really like talking to them as much as me or Katie. So just make sure that your CRA knows how to contact you if there are any issues finding the site, issues parking. Every site has their own unique nuances to it. Issues with the front desk staff. Just make sure. Also, make sure the CRA is led to their monitoring space. Make sure it's clean. Make sure there's not other studies lying around like source docs. I'll never forget because I was a monitor. I had a 3-year stint as a contract CRA myself. And I remember I went to the site to monitor, and the site sat me down. We're in a monitoring space, and I asked for the reg binder for the investigative site file. And they brought me the reg binder, and it had a lot of documents in it from another study. So it had some documents from the study I was monitoring and a whole bunch of documents from another study. Now, that could be a confidentiality issue. That's definitely like a violation of your company's CDA, that you're not supposed to have other study documents available for monitors not of that study. I think it's pretty obvious, but mistakes happen. That's another reason why I love Creo. It's very hard to make those kind of mistakes as everything's electronic. Yes, you could upload a document in the wrong file, but in theory, a lot of people should catch it as opposed to it being in a like hiding in a physical folder somewhere. So make sure it's clean. Make sure the monitor has a place to sit. Make sure that if you have like study material, there's no personal health information of patients lying around. Again, most monitors are not sticklers for this. It's just not a good look for your site to have PHI stuff of patients around where they are. In the monitoring space for our internal medicine clinic, it's not as ideal as monitoring here where I'm sitting, although they are welcome to come here. They still prefer to monitor there because that's the PI's actual office, so they prefer to talk to the PI, which I will get to next right now. But just make sure it's clean. There's not other studies around that they can easily see or accidentally access. Make sure if you are keeping IP there that it's locked. Make sure like there's certain things you can't hide from them, like lab kits from other studies. That's understandable. But when there's documents like on the table or in the drawers of the desks that they're in, you don't really want that to be an issue. So try to have a dedicated monitoring space that you kind of don't also use as a workspace. And in our case at the other site, it's not the most ideal, but we've been getting by because it's mainly just one of our PIs and not all 5 of them. The next thing is the PI. Make sure you communicate beforehand with the PI. And PIs need a lot of reminders. So make sure you communicate beforehand with the PI. Hey, there's a monitor. They're going to want to meet with you. Give them a quick update on their enrollment status and any major issues that you might be aware of. In our study, we're doing really good, and there's not much to update the PI on that he doesn't already know. Like he's aware of certain lab values and certain AEs that we've had, and even SAEs and different things like that, like different assessments. Our PI is pretty on top of it, at least safety-wise. So there's not much to really tell him, but I told him, hey, make sure like when you have time, go upstairs. The monitor's here until 5. And I knew that because the monitor's here for a 2-day visit, I knew that ideally the monitor wants to meet with the PI at the end of the monitoring visit, but I knew that the PI was not going to be here tomorrow because Wednesday's the PI's day off. And so it was either today or never, and it's better to have contact with the PI at least face to face once rather than not at all. So make sure PI knows. Tomorrow we have a SIV here where I'm sitting for another PI. I have already told that PI, make sure that you come here around noon. It's a SIV for a new study. And I'm actually going to remind the coordinator for that study right now to be here as well. Another thing is, so these are still like logistic things. Another thing is like make sure the CRA knows where the bathroom is, how to get water, try to be somewhat hospitable. I've been a monitor before, like I said, and I've basically been ignored the entire day. I've had to wait in the waiting room like an hour or more. I had to ask for certain things multiple times. Like I was literally walking around lost in certain buildings looking for who I need to talk to. So try not to make it like a wild goose hunt for the CRA. Just try to make their lives a little more easy. One of the things today that sprung up on me, but shout out to my sponsor Creo, I'm able to do remotely. The monitor also texted me, hey, I have a co-monitor today. Can you give her access to Creo? And it literally took me 3 minutes to do it. I got her email and then I actually submitted it wrong. I put a typo in the email and the monitor had to text me that she still didn't receive it. Then I figured out it was a typo, but Creo, I like Creo for that reason as well. Like you don't actually need to bring anything physically. We did bring investigational product, and now we'll get into like the actual contents of what they'll be monitoring. The first thing they look at is, the first thing they usually ask for is the investigator site file so that they can sign on the regulatory documents, the monitoring visit log. That's important for them to do it, and it's important for you to have the ISF available. And even if you are using eReg, sometimes these ISFs are physical wet ink signature, old school logs. So you still have, even if you're all digital, you still have some paper. As much as we don't like it, there's still plenty of paper around. So ISF, so make sure the ISF is there, the physical binder. Obviously, make sure they have access to the eReg. Make sure before they come that everything is filed properly. Regulatory wise, if there's been a protocol amendment since the last, if there's been a protocol amendment since the last monitoring visit, the monitor is going to check. One of the first things they're going to do is check if the site has had training on the new version of the protocol. So if you're a proactive site, you would have already trained the staff and had a signed training log. And the monitor is just going to confirm that it was done. If you're not a proactive site, that's going to be an action item and probably a finding like, hey, why isn't the training done? You guys are already on the new protocol, but you haven't been, it's not documented that you've been trained on it. So that's another aspect that you need to do. Same thing with consent forms. Make sure if there's been any ICF amendments, which is informed consent amendments since the last visit, that all active patients have re-signed the consent form and that it's available. That's another thing that the monitor is going to look at. One of the first things, new ICFs or just new ICFs in general, like new screenings since the last visit. One of the most important things they monitor are informed consent forms. So make sure that's there. If there have been deviations, make sure that they are documented. Like you could be a proactive site and say, hey, we committed a deviation. We already have the log. If there was if training was necessary, we've already done training. Make sure that that's there. Basically, this is what separates good sites from not so good sites, is sites that are doing things proactively versus being told what to do. Now, it's another thing if you don't know that you did a deviation, and that's the monitor's job, is to make sure that they look for these things. That's what they are monitors for, right? Now, not every site has dedicated QA capabilities. We're kind of in between. There's times where we do have a QA layer. There's times where we don't. Right now, it's really just our lead CRC doing the QA and a little bit of me. And our sub-I, Jaime, does a really good job of that as well. But, there's things that we can miss, and that's what the monitor's job is. But for the stuff that you already know, make sure it's documented in the deviation log. Even simple things like out of window visits, make sure that those are there. You'll start to learn your monitor's preferences over time. Every monitor has their own nuances, their own preferences, and you'll start adapting to, well, if you're not a hostile site, you'll start adapting to their preferences. If you are a hostile site or one that doesn't let you adapt to the monitor, you're going to have a less happy monitor. But not every site's able to do that. That's one of the benefits of being small site is we're flexible, we're adaptable to our monitor's needs and the sponsor's needs. We don't have rigid SOPs that can't be changed if we need to. So those are the things like regulatory wise. Source, look, make sure data is entered. Like if you're behind on data entry, the deadline really is by the time the monitor comes to visit. Same thing with queries. If you have a bunch of open queries, the deadline to answer them is by the next monitoring visit, like the day before, not during, because your monitor is going to come and open more queries. So you don't want the queries to just add on top of each other and pile up. You want to be on top of these things. So make sure, we use monitoring visits as like a deadline to get our queries answered. Ideally, you should be answering queries in real time. You should be entering data in real time. But at the bare minimum, I'm telling you how to not be a bad site. Use your monitoring visits as a proxy for when you need to have data entered and data cleaned and queries answered. Other thing from the source, ICF, which I mentioned already, very important. Make sure labs are signed and NCS in the right place. NCS means clinically significant, non-clinically significant. Don't let those lab results pile up, and it's hard to do once you start getting busy, but you need to really have a routine. You don't want a bunch of labs being signed like the day before the monitor gets there, or even worse, like during the monitoring visit because the monitor asked you about it, which has happened before. You want to try to get lab results signed within a few days of receiving them, ideally, from the PI. And I know it's annoying. You have to sometimes go out of your, physically go to the PI like we have to do a lot of times. But it's just the way it is. I think that's where admin might help a busier site. Like if the coordinators are busy seeing patients and things like that, admin can actually go get things signed. But coordinators do too, because sometimes lab results have results that the PI needs to communicate to the CRC. Hey, I don't like this particular result. Let's retest this. One of our PIs does that all the time. Why don't you retest this one because I don't like the way this is trending? Okay, well now I have to do an unscheduled visit, and if you're delegating that to the least experienced person on your team, how effectively does that get communicated back to the CRC? I mean, it's not impossible. You just have to make sure this admin knows the importance of these things too. So a lot of it really boils down to the site director responsibilities, and I like to be fairly hands-off with my staff and just trust that they're doing their jobs. But once in a while, I have to get in there and let them know, hey, this is important. This is important to me. This is important to the PI. This is important to the monitor. There's different spectrum of or categories of what's important and what's not. So from a source document standpoint, huge to get lab results signed and dated and NCS to CS. Same thing with ECGs. Make sure those are done and signed and dated, and make sure everything is filed in the appropriate place if you're using paper source, or uploaded in the appropriate place if you're using an e-source. So a lot of times the monitor will not have access to the lab results. Sometimes there's a separate binder if you're using eSource. Some sites have a separate notebook that just has lab results that you should give to your monitor. Other sites don't do that and just upload the lab results directly to, in our case, Creo. Whatever your system is, just make sure the monitor doesn't have to ask for these things, because then they'll just start querying things like lab results not available. And I remember when I used to monitor at one of my sites where the coordinator, it was a huge academic medical center, and they put me in a room like 3 buildings away from where the actual coordinator was. And the coordinator would never answer their phones or respond to their emails during my visit. So I could only monitor what's in front of me. And a lot of times labs were missing. And I can't find anyone to bring me the lab, so I had to query all these things in the EDC, like lab results not available. I essentially couldn't query a lot of the data because the labs were not there. So something that's often overlooked but super important. Another thing is the PI oversight. Make sure that there's PI footprint on the visits. Like, make sure the PI is aware of what's happening. And Creo makes it really easy. They e-sign. But also labs, back to labs and ECGs, the PI signing off on those in a contemporaneous manner. Contemporaneous meaning quickly and close to the date of origin. Super important. So from a source documentation perspective, that's how you prepare. From a regulatory perspective, that's how you prepare. The last thing is the investigational product. Make sure you have the temperature logs available. We use continuous temp monitoring. It's called Temp Stick that we use. And I set alerts to see if there are deviations or excursions, min-max. And if there are, we already know about it. And it goes to every coordinator's inbox, so there's some redundancy built in. But make sure the monitor has access to that. And they're going to ask for that, so just give it to them. Also, and I should have mentioned this on regulatory, things like CLIA expirations, medical license expirations, GCP expirations, things like that should be obviously kept up to date. Now, the investigational product, make sure that you have the returned IP available for the monitor to reconcile. So they're going to actually have to go and physically count pills or look at vials. So make sure those are there available for the monitor. You can bring them in. Some sites use a big cardboard box and put all the returned IP. They're supposed to be stored in the locked drug room, but on monitoring days, we have it ready for the monitor so they don't have to go looking for it or ask for it. It's just there and you could go see it, because the third and most important part, they're all important. The third thing monitors look at is investigational product accountability. So make sure that's there. Make sure any logs are there, not just temperature logs, but dispensation logs, reconciliation logs. Make sure you kept those up to date. And when the monitor leaves, again, if it's a 1-day, 2-day, 3-day monitoring event, make sure they do get a chance to talk to the PI. Make sure they get a chance to go through their summary of findings with the staff. It's okay if it's just one coordinator. Make sure that they are able to do that, and then try to resolve as much of the action items as you can in real time. Our coordinator today was working up there with the monitor, so he was able to resolve a lot of the things in real time, so that our follow-up letter is not full of action items and things like that. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's how you prepare for a monitoring visit. They usually want to schedule their next monitoring visit before they leave, and then the process starts all over again. Guru Nation, I hope this helps. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. Hey, if you guys like that kind of content, make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. Stay tuned for more videos.